What's up, guys? So, welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast episode number. What are we at now, Eugene?
322.
322. How do I not know this? Today, guys, we have a really fun one for you. At least it's fun for me. So, this is one of my buddies, Jason. Jason was one of my main training partners for a number of years back when I was a brown and black belt. And he's one of the guys that I had some of my formative experiences as I was moving to that expert level of grappling. We traveled together and competed together numerous times. And, a lot of my game came as a byproduct of training with him, And so again, I really was excited to have him on and talk about, jiu-jitsu and everything else. Things to know about Jason is that he got started way back in the day, back in the 90s. He's sort of a, quintessential martial artist. Started training in all sorts of different martial arts, right? Traditional martial arts, jiu-jitsu, boxing, the whole thing. He's an accomplished musician, and he is also almost blind, right? So visually impaired, right, is what it would technically be. But again, he's pretty much functionally blind. Like when he has to go this, if he has to, like, his phone has to be up right to his face to read it. And Jason's a really cool guy and a good sport. Whenever I used to see him back in the day, whenever I would greet him, he would come up, he could see me and, make out the blur that was my body. And he'd say, "Hey, Chew, what's up?" And, me being smart ass that I was, I would come up to him, and instead of greeting with a handshake or knuckles, I would come up and touch his face and be like, "Oh, hey, Jason, it's good to see you again." And I remember the first time I did that, and again, once you hear Jason in a second, you'll understand he's just got a good sense of humor.
That's the kind of relationship you have, though. Like when you're grinding each other's like faces in the mat and just going hard. Like that's just the relationship you get. You don't even like think twice about that stuff.
Well, and I've talked about this idea before, right? Like in male dominated groups, I don't know that it's the same with women, but I know in male dominated groups, right? There's a theory about what we do. So if you notice, if you guys have ever been in a traditional male dominated group where you're not being like looked over by, corporate, whatever, this and that, it typically devolves into a lot of like, banter back and forth and constantly cutting at each other. Even you get like a group of like firefighter dudes. I mean, they do the same stuff, right? And so with that, if you want to know why, the reasons, there's a couple of theories. Two of the ones that I think seem to make sense. One is that by saying things that would be offensive otherwise, but because it's coming from me, you don't take offense to it. Basically, it shows that our relationship is stronger than the joke. So yeah, if someone came up to Jason and he's, ordering food, and the waiter starts touching his face and saying, "Oh, okay, hey man, good to see you here." He would be rightfully irritated, but I do it and he laughs. So it's a show that the strength of our relationship is stronger than the offensiveness of the joke. And so this is one of the reasons why you see that a lot, right? And that's one theory that I think makes sense. The other one is that we constantly are all making jokes about each other. And the thought behind that is that, let's say that we're in this group together. If I make a joke about you and you laugh, then cool. But then if you make that same joke or a different joke or whatever about me and I get upset about it, then I'm now sort of signaling that I'm too good for the group. And so it's a way of keeping us all in check with each other to say, hey, like we're all in this group together. And so we're all sort of picking at each other. And I think that those two theories kind of make sense to me, at least. And so again, obviously me and Jason, talk crap about each other and always joust around with each other. But I had a lot of fun. Anyway, with that said, guys, great podcast. Some good takeaways from this one. And big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. Again, they are one of the premier companies out there for making CBD. They third-party test all of their stuff to make sure that it is the purity of the product is there, that what is on the label is what's inside the bottle, which again, I think is really important. Over the years, we've all seen different issues with certain supplements being tainted with compounds and things like this. And, a lot of times this is like some of the stuff you see where we initially think the person's just full of it, right? And then to come to find out, no, it was actually like a tainted batch of supplements that was causing like the drug test to pop hot or whatever. And again, with CBD being unregulated, there's a lot of wiggle room for what could be put into the bottle of CBD or the product that you're using. And again, Charlotte's Web is one of the companies that's out there that is pushing for regulation, because for them, they're doing everything the right way and ensuring that they have a product that they can sell with integrity. And so they want it to be regulated to a degree because they want to be able to make sure that it cleans up the market. This is us talking to them a few years back. But anyway, they make a great product. If you guys ever want to try if you want to try CBD, or if you've never tried it before, check their website out, charlesweb.com. The promo code is Chewjitsu30, CHEWJITSU30. And when you use that code, you'll get 30% off the order. And again, you can use it on all their products. I personally take CBD at nighttime as part of my nighttime routine. It's a supplement that I do seem to get benefit from. Again, I try a lot of supplements. I don't use all of them forever. This is one of the ones that's been in my routine for a number of years now. So guys, if you want to try it out, check them out at charlesweb.com. Also, thanks to my buddy Matt at Epic Roll, epicrollbjj.com. If you are looking for solid gear, great designs, great customer service, good quality, epicrollbjj.com is the website. The code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order, CHEWJITSU for 20% off the order. And again, he makes gis, rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, the whole deal, everything jiu-jitsu related. Go check him out. Also, for any of you guys that are interested, we'll be doing a new version of the Chewjitsu rash guards coming up in the near future. I'm currently waiting on the prototypes. I want to make sure that I see them in person and see them, with my actual eyeballs before I pull the trigger on it. And so we'll have those ready for you guys here in the near future. We'll have them ranked. So this way, if you want to wear them for a competition, or if you just want to have your own ranked rash guard instead of just a one solid color, you'll have access to that. And so again, more details on that to come, but just sort of keep that in the back of your mind. If you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by becoming a patron to our Patreon. And when you do that, you can do that at the website, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up and become a subscriber to our Patreon, obviously you're supporting the podcast and helping it continue going. So if you listen to the podcast week after week, we appreciate it. And then also, too, with that, we'll give you access to an exclusive library of content that will then give you access to ad-free versions of the podcast, seminars I've recorded, stretching and mobility routines that Eugene's put together specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners with the muscles and areas that they typically struggle with, and a lot of other stuff that's not released anywhere else. You also get a little bit of preferential treatment. So if you have a question that you would like answered on the podcast, you can drop it in there in the Patreon, and we will answer it on a upcoming podcast or Patreon episode for you. But again, the website is patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, if you would like to get access to my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, CHEWJITSU.net/join. When you join up, you'll get a couple of free ebooks sent to you. I finally have basically I'm replacing those ebooks. So I won't be giving them away in the near future. And I will be replacing that with a different ebook coming up it's going to be in August sometime. I haven't set the date, probably around like August, like the end of August, I would think, probably like August 30th or something like that. So if you guys want to get it, get it sooner than later. Won't be there forever. But again, you can go to my website to join up and, get those free ebooks along with getting my daily email. My daily email goes into everything from, jiu-jitsu training tips, diet, strength training, books I'm reading, philosophical ideas that I like, just anything and everything. Chewjitsu.net/join is the website to get access to that. And guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast with Jason. So for you guys listening, the Jason on the podcast here with us today, I don't know if I mentioned this in the intro or not. Basically, I don't know about you, Jason. The first time I met you, I don't know if you remember this, was at a seminar that Renato did at it was at the Achieve Martial Arts place that we were training at. So when I was a blue belt, we were training in it was a Japanese jiu-jitsu gym that would allow us to use the mats periodically to a couple times a day to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes. And so Renato Tavares came in and did a seminar there. And I remember that was the first time that I ever rolled with Jason. Jason was a purple belt, and he beat the shit out of me, in a good way. He wasn't like he was mean or anything like that. But I remember rolling with him. I was like, man, that dude is tough. And then, eventually we ended up being at the same gym, and we were training partners for a long time. But that was my first encounter with you back in 2005.
Wow. And you're a white belt.
I was a blue belt.
Blue belt. Okay.
Yeah, I got my blue belt.
Yeah, I was probably a purple. You sure it
You were
wasn't a
purple.
brown?
You were
Yeah.
purple, and I was. You were purple. I was a blue because I got my blue belt in 2006, and I remember you being a purple belt because purple belts were a big deal at the time,
Yeah, way
and
bigger.
yeah, you know what I mean. And so, like me, of course, I was like, okay, let me test myself with this purple belt guy. Let me see what I've got, and beat the snot out of me.
How so? What
Yeah.
exactly did Jason do to you? You probably remember it more than he does.
Well, Jason, I mean, Jason could do whatever he wanted to from any position at that point to me. But, the thing that always impressed me about Jason, when I rolled with him and what actually made him a great training partner for me was that he was one of the few dudes that would like when I was on my back and if he was on top, it was like death. You know what I mean? It was just like, just tons of pressure. That relentless pressure passing style that, a lot of people have. And it was just tough for me to deal with. And I remember the pressure was always there. And, especially back then too, because we were both young. It wasn't and I don't mean this in a negative way. There was nothing mean about it. There was no dick moves or anything like that, but it still wasn't the nicest role. You know what I mean? Like
It was intense
it was
for
an
sure.
intense role and it was
Yeah.
rough. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it was the role that you needed if you were going to be a tough, gritty competitor MMA fighter.
Yeah.
Interesting. So Jason, what kind of we kind of talked a little before the podcast. What got you into like martial arts in general and kind of what you've been doing this thing for quite a while, many years, probably more than half your life now. So what kind of got you into it?
Well, it got me into it really. I mean, I wrestled since I was a kid, like I said, but I wasn't really that into wrestling. I was actually just wanted to be a guitar player. So, but my family is like some crazy ass hillbillies. So I just kept on seeing like, it's like bare knuckle fights break out and stuff. But I'm like, man, I am going to have to, I'm going to have to learn how to fight just in case something happens. If I'm just out playing guitar and somebody starts fist fighting, I'm going to have to learn something. So I do what a lot of people do. I, I got into Taekwondo and all that stuff, but as soon as I could, I got a chance to like watch some UFC. I was at the school for the blind, and I would go to like Blockbuster on Brownsboro Road, and like UFC one, and I'd come back and watch it. It was like a real long time ago for sure. But and then when I kind of started thinking about that same time, I got involved with like these Wing Chun guys, and it was a guy named Grandmaster Henry Cook, which Chewy actually knows, you know,
Yeah, I got
and
a fun story for him later.
yeah, and I tell you, I would just say stuff like, "Hey, man, I mean, this is cool and stuff, but what if somebody takes you to the ground?" They'd be like, "Man, nobody's gonna take me to the ground," I was like, "I don't know." So that's kind of what got me into it. And then, I was training Wing Chun, and I was working as hard as ever, and I just couldn't get it. I really couldn't get it for some reason. And then they decided to have some like fights at the little school. And I was like, hey, maybe we should put some mats down so people could do takedowns and stuff. And they're like, yeah, cool, good idea. And then I just went to like a jiu-jitsu school for like a month, and then kind of came back and kind of won that little thing. So that's kind of got me kind of into MMA.
So what year did you start jiu-jitsu?
I started jiu-jitsu. It must have been 97 when I first started messing around with it. Maybe even at the end of 96. So 96 or 97, and I got a training partner. He was just some kind of a broke guy, but he was into it, named Gavin. And I would just like, we'd get together and box and roll around and do jiu-jitsu. But I was going over to like, whatever, like some schools in town. I'd just go in for an open mat and buy a punch card or whatever and try to learn it that way. So I started probably like 97, must have been.
Was this Gavin from Louisville MMA?
Yeah, that was Gavin.
Were they training at the community center at the time?
That was way before the community center. We actually trained at the school for the blind. So I knew the people there, and like they would let me just like sign out the key for the gym, and we just go in there and just battle and lift weights or whatever, So
Yeah.
it was awesome.
Yeah, I'm making notes because we're getting your story out of it, but then afterwards we're gonna like come back around, and there's a lot of fun stories that we can tease out of all these things coming out that like people just it's just fun to talk about.
Did you grow up in like Louisville? Is that kind of where it started?
Right. I grew up in Louisville, but since I went to a school for the blind, I wouldn't go home every weekend. So I was growing up like in Louisville and also kind of out in Pike County or something.
Okay.
So or whatever county we happened to live in at that time. So, but mostly when I was training, when I got out of high school, and even when I was in high school, I'd work in the summer or work jobs, fast food jobs, whatever, to pay for my martial arts. So when I was in high school, so whatever I paid for, I could take the bus to wherever I wanted to go. Like if I wanted to go train with Henry Cook or go to Taekwondo or whatever. Most places wasn't the best, but I mean I could at least make it to some sort of training. So it all kind of happened in Louisville.
Honestly. And if people don't know a lot about you, you have some, like, you're visually impaired. Like, can you share kind of a little bit about what happened, or kind of how you started kind of training, and kind of how that maybe influenced or impacted your training as well?
Oh, well, it definitely influenced it. I mean, obviously, because the truth is like, well, I'm visually impaired. I'm not fully blind, obviously. I can see some, but I have corrected 2200. So a lot of people don't really know what that means. It's like, what are you, -8, -7? I don't know about that. That's just the prescription. So 2200 is with corrected vision. I can see at 20 feet when you can see at 200 feet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, I call myself Blind Fury, but it's a lot cooler than like visually impaired Fury. It's maybe a little more accurate, but
doesn't roll off the tongue quite as nicely.
Doesn't roll over there. Yeah, Rucker Howard, visually impaired Fury didn't work. And you don't pick your own nickname. So I'm glad I got this one before I could have got a couple others.
Yeah, right.
It's like, I'm glad this one stuck.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, it was tough because, I mean, when it came to grappling, I felt like it gave me a huge advantage. The problem really is when I was trying to get people to punch me in my face. So people had some reservations. I was like, no, I want to come over and box with you. And they're like, no, I don't want to hit a blind guy. So I had to find some real nuts to, like, people with no qualms
with no morals.
Yeah, no morals or ethics.
Just like, we're going to beat up on this person who can't see these punches coming.
Yeah.
Until it's too late.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's okay. I mean, I was signing up for it. He's like, you know what you're getting into? I was like, yeah. I was like, well, put them on, I guess. I was like, all right. Yeah. So, but I actually enjoyed all that stuff. So, but it definitely, trying to find people that would understand, and people that kind of would give you a chance. Not everybody was real open to it, and when they meet you and they see you looking at your phone or reading something up close, they think, well, this guy ain't gonna be able to block these punches. But, after a couple of years, I was all right, not too bad. But yeah, it's just that kind of stuff. But I think the grappling portion, and really even a bit of the Wing Chun stuff, still is like my favorite thing to do. I still, especially as I'm older, and I used to do the rough MMA and boxing, just like, a lot of us in that generation did. We got into it for fighting. But now I feel like that is something I can teach my students fairly well, is how to feel, how to hand fight, and how to, really use jiu-jitsu where it's not using as much strength. But it definitely starts with hand fighting and being able to feel for me. And that's kind of what I pass on to them.
For sure, yeah. Because, I mean, one of the things that I think about is, what are some of the characteristics that will, like, change, that are different between, say, like a white belt and, say, a black belt? And one of those is the extreme sensitivity that we develop. For instance, like with my body, I'm really sensitive to the subtle shifts of someone's weight, their movement, and things like that. And it's not something that you can teach. It's something you have to learn how to feel, right? Like you have mat time, and you can tell people you can give them cues to look for, but until they felt it a number of times, they don't have that level of sensitivity. And that's one of the things where you probably had if you want to think, like, there's pros and cons to everything, right? Weaknesses and strengths. And I guess one of the strengths of being, the visually impaired Fury is that you probably had an increased sense of sensitivity on your body because of the fact that you couldn't see as well, right? So where we might rely on our eyes to look around, you have to rely on that feeling from your body, and that probably sped that process up a little bit.
It did. I have to admit this, and I mean, I'm not ashamed to say it, but the Wing Chun really helped too. So the reason I think it helped is because you're, kind of learning about some real weird concepts, and you have to feel it, right? So even though it, you can say it's practical or not, or whatever people's opinion on it is, I felt like getting to understand that stuff, even though I wasn't really particularly good at it, I think that it helped influence me on how to think about jiu-jitsu. So I've always been drawn to people that maybe they don't teach you in a technical way. They teach you more in like a conceptual way, like a big
Mhm.
broad thing makes a lot more sense to me. And then, being able to explain how something feels, if somebody can explain like this should feel like this, and you're not doing this, you're not doing that, then I can understand that pretty easily too. But I do think like the kind of the combination of being visually impaired and then getting trained, some of these martial arts that really rely on sensitivity first, they take out some of the aspects of your attributes. I mean, I've
Mm.
been training, lifting, working out my whole freaking life, so it's not like I'm not an athlete. But you'd get in there with people that are real skinny and small, and you'd have to tone your strength back just so you can work the technical aspect of it. And then it really helps you understand like timing and stuff like that. Now, I don't know how much Wing Chun you would need, maybe just like a 5-minute lesson, but the portion of it is that, yeah, I think it helped tremendously, honestly. Because once I got
Yeah.
into it, I thought it was real clear. It's like when somebody would tell me, "Oh, just do this, do that," I would do it. I would notice that other people weren't doing it. You know what I mean? And so when I roll someone, it's like, "Oh, they're just using 100% arm strength here. They're not using their back and their weight to cause any pressure."
Mm. So to kind of go back to a couple of things that you were talking about there. So he was talking about the guy Gavin, and there was an MMA team back in the day called Louisville MMA, right? Very clear. And their sort of first iteration, because it changed a couple times, but their first iteration that I came across was in a community center.
Douglas.
Yeah, Douglas Community Center in the center of town. And I remember, I'm in high school. I'm a senior in high school, and I'm trying to find places to train. And I called them up, and they're like, "Yeah, come on down." And one of the guys there was a wrestling coach at one of the schools, I think at Atherton. He's like, "Yeah, come on in."
That's
So
Gavin.
yeah, well, so I didn't go there first. I ended up training with my other coach for a while, but I started going there every now and then as a blue belt. And I remember like my first time there, I ended up rolling with like Brent, and we had this like 30-minute round and whatever else. I came there a couple times, and I always thought it was funny because like you would go in there and there would be a community center, and they were like playing basketball upstairs. And then you would go down these stairs to this little downstairs area, and in the middle of some weight equipment and stuff, you would see guys, put some mats down, and I mean, they're just throwing down, going after each other. And it was such a weird mixture of people because you had people that obviously took it very seriously. And then there was one time I came down there and there was guys eating like fried chicken, and they had a fight next week. You know what I mean? I'm like, hey, like, and they're like, yeah, I got a fight next week and I got to cut a little weight, and he's eating a bucket of KFC. I'm like, huh.
I
Seems
should have
like
done
maybe
that diet. That's a good one.
yeah, right. And then the basketball coach that would be upstairs, would eventually come down there and say, "Hey, you guys done yet?" Kind of basically calling everybody out of it. And it's one of those things where most people, when they go into gyms these days, they take it for granted that was kind of the norm, that everybody, nobody had enough money to support a school back then. So everybody was
Oh man.
training in whatever space that they could find,
Oh my God.
and, even some of the jiu-jitsu schools would typically be sort of jiu-jitsu plus whatever, Kempo, Taekwondo, whatever they
Or
could.
they'd be in a dance studio. I remember like when the Cannon Brothers, they were like a jazzercise or something.
We were in a jazzercise place for a little bit. My old coach was we were in a powerhouse gym for a while, and then we moved into a Japanese jiu-jitsu gym for a while. And then the Cannon brothers, like Colin and Kyle, my coaches, they at one point were in a Taekwondo studio, and that was going along swimmingly until one day the Taekwondo guys kind of like, they basically had a challenge fight because the Taekwondo guys said that it wouldn't work. And so like Colin and Kyle had to fight the owner and his son, like in separate matches. And
I hope it was the owner and the son on one of them each.
yeah, right. So
hope it wasn't one-on-one for those poor guys.
Obviously,
Poor Taekwondo guys.
Obviously the Taekwondo guys did not win, and my coaches got kicked out, and so they had to move. And then it was the jazzercise place. But again, it's interesting to see those places. Then you were talking about Grandmaster Henry Cook. So this is a fun one because that dude, like, he's like a cult legend in like Louisville.
Yeah.
I mean, like this guy's like the martial arts, the traditional martial arts community. He's a big deal in Louisville. And I mean,
Yeah,
like,
and he's a big deal in other places. He really, a
is
lot
he?
of people, yeah, because he won a lot of tournaments. So he won a lot of like fighting tournaments, and he did forms and stuff. Like my
Okay.
judo coach knows him. So
Wow.
he was telling me that, he was winning all the sparring tournaments, like, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia. They had this big circuit. and then he would win it. But then he went away for a couple of years, and he came back, and he was doing kung fu forms. He quit fighting and just got into forms and stuff. But he won like a bunch of stuff. I mean, he's, you know, at sport karate, he wasn't, you know, not like unknown. But then he comes back as a kung fu guy, and you know, it gets. I'm not saying it doesn't get weird. It does. It gets weird. Hell yeah. But but he was at least legit in that realm for and well known actually.
Yeah. Well, and what I mean is, like, again, he might have some skills, and there's nothing wrong with this, but I mean, like, it's like, because I lived next to him for a while. He was like, I lived in an apartment, and right next to him was he. I remember one day I'm out there hanging up my gis, and he's like, "Oh, are you a martial artist?" And at the time, I'm like 22, an MMA fighter. I'm like, kinda, whatever. And he said, "Well, hi, my name's Dr. Dr. Grandmaster Henry Cook, whatever." Yeah, I'm like, that's a lot of titles, and so. But I remember then hearing people talk about him, and they would talk about this dude like he was the second coming of Jesus.
Oh, yeah, dude. Oh my gosh.
Like this look would come over their eyes, and it wasn't like you were talking about someone that you had reverence for their abilities of fighting. It was like you had a dude who like could like move mountains and walk on
rip
water.
Your heart out.
Yeah, right. And so there you go. Give you the 5-finger like hit thing, and you walk away and you die. But interesting guy though. And again, kind of like a martial arts legend that people just knew about here. I didn't know that about his fighting career though beforehand.
Yeah, and he did judo too. Actually, he was the first person to teach me like a straight arm bar and a triangle choke.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of like loose. It's like, hey, check this out. It wasn't loose, but it was like, this is what you want to do. This is good. I see you like this. So he would show me a little bit of that. So yeah, it was definitely an experience. But when he did allow us to, like, we had some like in school tournaments, and we had some people come out that were invited to the tournament to participate. Like different people. It was pretty fun. So we got to actually spar kind of hard, but not too hard. Yeah. There were some weird rules for sure.
What was it about him, Chewy, maybe, and Jason? What was it about him that like maybe you think was so captivating or endearing, that like the people would just kind of
his personality.
See him as this? Yeah.
So a lot of his personality. So I mean, as far as skill goes, I mean, I just think of him as like a Wing Chun guy. I mean, he's like a Jeet Kune Do guy, Wing Chun guy, really. Right? He's good, but that's to me what he was. He knew a lot of stuff, but they also did a lot of things to kind of. It was kind of weird. I mean, I didn't last too long in this organization. I kept getting like knocked down in rank because I was a question asker. So even though I learned a lot from him, I don't think he liked me very well sometimes, because I was like, hey, you couldn't get up to us. I couldn't get up to a certain rank. I kept on just getting knocked down, like to basically like yellow belt. It's like every time I was like, black belt, it's like yellow belt. Essentially, like, you want to be a level 5? No, level 2 again. I'm like, damn, it's like third time. But yeah, I think it was just his personality, and then the way other people talk about it. There's also this element of I don't know how to say it, but it's kind of like bullshit. So like pressure points is a real thing there. Like dim mock. He has stuff like one time he tried to show me, especially when I was working for the Army, he brought me up and he wanted to show me combat nails, and I'm talking about fingernails. I ain't talking about some magic nails you're throwing at someone like. Right, that actually had been some stuff, but he was like trying to poke on me and grab my finger like this, and was like digging the nail in. I was like, "No, man, I don't know what you're getting at, but I think this combat nail thing needs to go through another iteration of trials." So it's just stuff like that. So they had an element of crap in there for sure, and like chi and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah, and with that kind of stuff, I think it's one of those things where. You see this in jiu-jitsu sometimes too, where you'll see a person who doesn't really train, and again, I'm not saying that everybody has to train forever, right? But their abilities become completely divorced from reality, where all of a sudden, like because they're not training, because they're not rolling, because they're not exposing themselves, and because people don't actually see them do those things, right? This person no longer is like one of us. It becomes like this person who's now different, right? It's like, for instance, let's say I'm not saying that he would be, but like, let's say if you saw some celebrity that you idolize or that you put on some pedestal, and then you saw him like cutting the grass or taking out the trash, you're like, well, you're just a regular person, right? But because you never see those things, and I think in a lot of cases, some of these celebrity types, even if they do those things, will make sure you don't see those things, because it would take away the aura of who they are. Well, like likewise with that, with so a lot of traditional martial artists, you wouldn't see them, and this is true with a lot of jiu-jitsu guys too, sometimes with instructors, you won't ever see them spar. They won't ever do their rolling, in the classes or anything like that. They may have a small group that they do it with, but they shield that from the regular classes. So you never actually see them in trouble. You never see them like one of us
Oh my
or
gosh.
get put in a bad position. So what ends up happening is then it leaves your imagination to wander and like, who are you? You know what I mean? And you then build this persona up that's divorced from reality. And I think that's what happens with why a lot of the, you have a lot of that, and it exists in jiu-jitsu too,
It
just
does, yeah.
to a less degree, because we end up training a lot more and rolling. It's considered more normal, but in a lot of traditional martial arts, you'd have this sort of like, guru culty like status for the main figurehead, and because they're not training all the time, it's like, oh man, he's really good. You should see him. He can
No,
do this, that.
yeah. The thing about Henry Cook, he would always do like chi sao and stuff with us, so we were always doing that. That wasn't so bad, but we never seen him like fight anyone. But we had an idea that he could punch hard. He was training us to punch hard. I mean, it wasn't just like it was just Wing Chun. I mean, he taught us some boxing and stuff like that too. But it was kind of like I said, like kind of like Jeet Kune Do. But yeah, it's like we never see him fight. Like there was a lot of myths around him. Like he did this, he did that, he could do this. And it was like some of it was kind of out there. Some of it was like, yeah, he can knock a guy with one punch. Well, I certainly could believe that. That's a reasonable thing. But some of the things other people, but I didn't hear him really say anything. They just said, I heard this or something, So it's like a lot of, definitely myth built around it, but I don't know if he was actually ever stating all of that. You know what I mean? So, but
No, and I don't think it's him stating it. I think it becomes like a thing where, like, I'll give you an example that's not from traditional martial
he
arts.
didn't deny it, I tell you that though.
Our boxing, we had an old boxing coach at the gym years ago, and literally the guy was just kind of our other boxing coach who was competent and was very good. He ended up having some substance abuse issues.
All right.
And so we had to replace him. And it just so happened that this guy was over here and we're like, okay, man, like, can you teach a class? Can you get people hitting pads and stuff? He's like, sure. So, basically he started teaching classes, and it was just like, okay, well, we'll replace him later with someone that's more competent, but he was a nice enough guy. And so it was like, it was working out, but he was not a good boxer as far as his ability to actually do it. And so what you would see is like everybody, I remember hearing people talk about it. They would talk about him, and they would talk about his skills and abilities, and they would sort of, oh man, he's really good. What? Da, da, da. And I'm like, the guy's never, like, he boxed for maybe 6 months before he was just getting you guys to hold pads, right? Like, but because he never exposed himself to the sparring like everybody else was going through, it let their minds wander, and he did nothing obviously to quell that, but he let their minds wander, like, oh man, he's really good.
I see. He never did anything.
Yeah. So like, again, if you're a martial arts instructor and guys are like basically in awe of you, like, you're not going to stop them, say, hey, no, like, whatever, especially if you're like trying to like keep them there, you're like, just go ahead, keep talking about me, whatever.
Definitely would put Henry in that boat in that case, but he's definitely more of a traditional cat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's good, but yeah, it does happen in jiu-jitsu and MMA sometimes. Especially when you have like back in the day, because people, they didn't have a lot of coaches, and some guy that knew a little bit could figure out some for MMA, and then I've seen it happen. So there was a club, and then they had an instructor that had done like some Jeet Kune Do and stuff, but maybe some like other martial arts too. So he would go to camps and do this stuff, learn drills, and then come back and teach like his crew that stuff. You know what I mean? And then, but he would never really spar. So it was definitely a thing that I saw with him, that it was like, these guys are already better at fighting than you just in a couple of months, because you just don't do it.
Right.
The funny thing to me though that I never get is, why don't people want to train? I would never be able to figure that out. It's like the funnest thing, even if you're old or whatever, and just getting out there and rolling, and if somebody kicks your ass, that's like the best part of it. That keeps you humble and keeps you in shape, and it keeps the game going. It's like when you have, like Eugene and I are talking about it, like everybody, purple belts today are killers compared to even when I was a purple belt. I mean, they've got like great coaches and great technique, and man, I want to see what they got. I want to go out there and see what they're doing. I want to see new stuff. And I just can't believe that, if you're like a teacher, that you wouldn't want to do it. I like teaching, obviously it's what I do, but I mean, first and foremost, I like to train. So, I mean, I can't imagine anybody not just wanting to train all day. Seems insane.
It's just how we're wired.
Yeah.
I think some people, it's just like in their you enjoy a specific part of training. You've mentioned like even getting your ass kicked, you know, if that happens, you're like, hey man, that's a good day on the mat. Some people can't handle that, you know. It like seems like it may take away from the aura, their presence, their
They should have took up pickleball because martial arts is exactly meant to kick your ass.
Yeah, and we're all gonna get our ass kicked, and we're all getting older. It's gonna happen eventually. Like you're gonna get caught by some of your students, and that's just what happens. And they get better. That's the whole point. That means you're doing your job well. If they are getting better and giving you trouble on the mats, that means you're doing your job well as a coach.
That's right. Yeah.
So here's a question for you, Jason, with your jiu-jitsu stuff, right? When did you sort of go through all this traditional martial arts stuff, whatever? When did you get serious about doing jiu-jitsu, and when did you find your first like real jiu-jitsu gym, a gym that's like an actual good jiu-jitsu gym that you can train at?
Oh, well, I was always pretty serious about it. I think once I kind of found martial arts, I just kind of didn't want to do anything else.
Okay.
But I wanted to really learn how to fight. And the more I got into it, the more I liked it, right? So after kind of training with Henry and, you know, doing jiu-jitsu, I basically just said, hey, man, I'm going to go do this jiu-jitsu stuff. He's like, cool, you know. And then I took some lessons, like a few lessons with Scott Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped out. He broke it down to like all the position stuff. He's like, hey, do this, do that. Like after 5 lessons, I definitely learned a lot more than I had messing around. And then what ended up happening is I went to a school in Lexington, Kentucky, and I got traded 4 seasons. Mm-hmm. And I was going there to school, but really I was going there to train. So I went and just basically just trained as much as I could. And they had training at lunch, afternoon, night. I mean, they made me teach some kung fu, like some Wing Chun, but I didn't, so I didn't have to pay. So, you know, basically whatever I had to do. And then, but that was the first time. And Mike O'Donnell, who's the black belt there, was so good. He was definitely like really serious, and he had a lot of elements that I still value today, because he had a real practical approach, but he was also very creative with the way he would solve problems in jiu-jitsu. So that was such a great influence to have, because I was like, man, this guy's doing it. This guy's good. He's good as hell. So I was like, yeah. So that's when I really buckled down and said, and really committed myself to it. Probably in Lexington.
How much did you train when you like first started out? Like how much did you really, how frequently were you training? Were you able to train? You know, how'd your body hold up through that process as well?
Oh man. Well, I'd say when I first started training and I started doing like MMA, I wasn't ever, when I was wrestling, I was never in like great shape. I was never in like the best shape I could be, you know, because I wasn't really particularly strong. So I was like, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get strong. I was going to U of L at the time, and they had a free gym membership, and I was just in there deadlifting, bench pressing, and squatting, you know, just as much as I could. I mean, just in there, just with my Rage Against the Machine on, or whatever the hell you listened to in the 90s, and just in there by myself, you know, everybody else probably on dates. I'm just in the gym. So that's the first thing I had to do. And then when we were training, like I was training with Gavin, I got to use the school for the blind. So there, I mean, I would lift weights there too, but I would run the stairs. And I was also doing like, remember the Lion's Den book? Shamrock wrote that book. He's talking about body weight. So I was doing body weight on some days. So I think my fitness allowed me to train a lot more. So I would train as much as I possibly could. If I couldn't roll or box or anything, I would just do conditioning. If that was just in my room doing squats, you know, 500 squats or whatever, that's what I did. So for me, I've always trained a lot. So when I got to 4 seasons, I was ready to train like hours, probably a day. And I would go to my classes. I'd work jobs on the weekends. I'd bounce. I'd do whatever I could so I could train. And, you know, I'd only work jobs that would allow me to train full time. So I'd go to my classes, train at lunch, go study, come back, train all night. I would train a lot. I'm big into that because I didn't think, you know, I was that good. So I felt like I had to really just go all in on it. So I felt like I had to put the work in real seriously.
Well, yeah, I think it's like what a lot of us did back in the day where, you know, we didn't have the resources available to train in certain ways for a long time. And so we just basically trained as much as we possibly could to make up for it, right? Or we're just going to train all the time. I remember I used to do the same stuff. With your jiu-jitsu also, I'm curious, I don't know the story behind it. How did you end up meeting Renato?
Well, I met Renato. He came to, I was training at Four Seasons, and, you know, Mike, he was under Carlson Jr.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I didn't have a problem with Carlson Jr. or Mike or anything like that, but I did feel like Carlson was like my dude, you know what I mean? And I met Renato. He came in to visit, but there was actually this seminar. I think Colin and Kyle had him for a seminar.
Okay, yeah, he did. He did. Back, this is like, okay.
Yeah. And then I went to that. And I don't think I talked to him too much because everybody was like, you know, talking to him and stuff. And I just thanked him or whatever. But then when he came into Four Seasons, I was like, I remember. He goes, oh, I remember you too. And then he had, it was like 2000, probably 2000. And then around 2001, he moved to Lexington for a little bit, for like 8 months. He was living in Lexington and trying to start a school. So it was just like there's a few mats in a gym. And I was like, I'm just going to go train with this guy. I mean, he's so good. And I went and trained with him, and I got to train with him for like 8 months. And man, it was really eye opening. So that blew my mind, getting to roll with that guy for a while, for 8 months straight. When you're a blue belt going to like purple and you're rolling with like such a badass, it was just getting creamed. So that's how I met him, and that's how I got stuck with him. Yeah, you got stuck with me, I should
say. And those guys back then, this is another thing that, like, if you've only been doing jiu-jitsu for, you know, within the time frame of like the last 10 to 12 years, you don't understand then what it was like back in, you know, the early 2000s and mid 2000s when streaming video wasn't ubiquitous and you didn't have instructionals everywhere. When you met someone that had like this like skill, it was like it's like one of those kung fu movies where they found the master, and this person has skills and abilities and techniques that you don't know, you've never seen them before, and you have no other access to them. The only access you have is through this guy.
That's
and
right.
So you would meet some of these guys at seminars, or you'd come across them, like you said, at different places, and literally they're feeding you stuff, and you're like, you're literally just sitting there dumbfounded. You're like, oh my God, this dude's he's got it, right? And again, it's a crazy thing to think about it, because now it's like, you know, yes, your coaches obviously know stuff you don't know sometimes, but we can all get online and we kind of get an idea of everything that's going on, and then it becomes our coaches to help us curate it or to actually implement it. Back then, it was like they would show you stuff and you had no clue, and when you found that guy, it was so much more of a powerful experience.
It's a secret technique, man.
It was cool. It was just tons of secrets, and it was like stuff you had never seen, never even thought of. You had no conception of, right? Like, because it'd be like one thing you could like think, Gordon Ryan can take my back and trap my arms and choke me, right? Well, we know because we see him do it, and he has instructionals on it, whatever. It's another thing to all of a sudden go with Gordon Ryan, and there's no videos on Gordon Ryan. You see some of his matches, but you don't know everything else he's got under there, and you roll with him, or you get taught by him, and you're like, oh my God, like this what is going on here? This is like breaking the matrix for me as far as jiu-jitsu goes.
Oh my God, I remember my first roll with Renato. It's like basically, he's like, where do you want to start? We're doing no-gi. I was like, I'll start on my butt, you know, because, you know, I'm a bigger guy. And man, I never thought that somebody could no, everybody does it. Everybody does it when they tiptoe over your like butterfly guard.
Yeah.
And man, he hit me with that, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell? He's like, what was that? And now I'm like on the bottom of a knee on belly. I was like, I'm going to get out of here. I didn't get out of there. But the thing is like, I mean, he did it a couple more times. And then when I blocked him, he jumped over and grabbed my toe and put me in a toe hold. I was like, well, it's like, you know, but now you see that stuff. And I think you're right. I mean, I think that, you know, everybody kind of sees a lot, especially what's going on now. I mean, you know, even if you don't like Gordon Ryan and you don't follow his stuff, somebody in your school probably is. I mean, I have guys that they do the headquarters position, no gi. They got his videos. They're doing that stuff. You're still getting exposed to it, even if you're not, because it's so wide known. But I think it's cool that, you know, you still like. I think it's just more out there in the open. You know what I mean? I think everybody sees it. There's no, I mean, are there really secret techniques? Maybe, but usually it's going to be a variation of something the way I see it, you know?
For sure. I mean, this is like, I talked to like several guys that were from the old Carlson Gracie senior gym down in Brazil during like the 80s and early 90s. And, you know, they were talking about it, that the techniques that they were developing at the time were like school guarded secrets, right? Because the idea was that like when they would have these big competitions that would happen a few times a year, they would go out and they would unleash this new technique on people and they hadn't seen it before. And so all of a sudden they have this advantage. And so they wouldn't allow cross training. They wouldn't allow people to spread those techniques because they wanted it to be a surprise when they got to the competition. And there was a lot of, quote, secrets. Now people, understand like you can spread the secrets all you want to. Very few people will take advantage of them because of the fact that most people don't actually implement anything. You could, hey, look, it's all there. You know what I mean?
Right,
like you literally, like everybody has at their fingertips right now. You have the collected wealth of human knowledge at your fingertips, mostly available to you for mostly free. And instead you're watching stupid videos on TikTok, right? So like, obviously we don't have to worry about people like really going after this stuff because they're just not going to. Then
right. They're not spending 6 hours. They watch one move. They can spend the rest of the day just training that move. They're not doing that. They're not. They're just like watching it and then going to class and trying to, put that shit together in the mid roll. They're never going to get it. It's just
not unless you're already very skilled from the position.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're really good at back mount and you learn some new back mount stuff, very easy to implement.
Right, but if it's a brand new position, like the 100% new, there's no way you're going to catch it. Right?
Yeah,
you have to study. You still have to study and go deep.
You got to study, and then you've got to practice in lots of different ways, and that's really where their coaches are going to have to come into the play. Where the coaches can then break down a lot of this stuff, and then can then to the students actually help them implement it, so that they're able to work this stuff into their game.
And there's so many good coaches today too. I mean, that's the other thing we were talking about is that, even small towns and like places that you don't think may have good jiu-jitsu actually have really good jiu-jitsu out there now. I mean, and the way they train, a lot of people train so smart too, compared to the way we did it back in the day, just like rolling, these death rounds. It's like, I ain't gonna let this guy catch me, but I gotta catch him, like that was too much. That's not the best way to train for sure. So lightening up the way people train now, it's really, coupled with the coaching, coupled with the knowledge. I mean, I think you can get good at jiu-jitsu anywhere this day and age if you're really committed.
100%. Well, I mean, back when so for you guys listening, Jason was one of my like main training partners. Like, at the gym, I was one of the best guys, and there were a few guys that were above me. And, Jason was one of those guys, and he was one of my best training partners from like 2007 to like 2009 or whenever you left. It was 2009, somewhere around
2010,
there. Maybe 2010. Okay. So like for several years, we were out there. It was 2010. Yeah. So for several years, and I remember, that we would always go. And when we were going, every now and then we might lighten it up, but typically it's like two pit bulls rolling with each other, just fighting and getting after each other. It was
safe. It was safe. It was good, especially, and that's when we really started getting into like positional sparring. Cause I think at the time I was like, even I knew I had weaknesses, and I was like, man, the only way I'm going to get these things fixed is if I just kind of put myself in this position, and somebody's going to have to kick my ass. Somebody's going to kick my ass from this position, and I'm going to have to figure it out, because that's how you get better, really. So,
yeah. Well, like one of the stories I share, like a lot on my YouTube channel and even on the podcast, is we were getting ready for a competition for the Arnold Classic, and we were getting ready for that in 2010. And I remember there were a couple Sundays where we would come in and we had a timer set for 2 minutes. You'd go for 2 minutes. I'd go for 2 minutes. And I remember I would take your back, and then you would escape back. And then for me, I was like, I needed to work on side control escapes because it was my worst position. So I'm like, well, put me in your side control. And we just went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Oh man.
And I got so much from that over those Sunday sessions, because, it was just so much time in position. And then like now, like, like someone could put me in side control and like, I'm totally relaxed. I don't care. It's like any other position, because it's, I spent so much, and that trait, that ability started back then in 2010, where, getting smashed by you over and over again, and then figuring a way through it made my escape so much better. My ability to relax and survive so much better.
Well, rolling with you is when I really first experienced halfback, and I had seen it, and I was like, wait, whatever. I don't need that. But when we started rolling, I was like, damn, I can't get out of this position, and I was like, but now it's like my number one thing. If you told my students like I couldn't get out of it, they would probably laugh. But it was getting me murdered. But then I realized like, hey, this is a great way to control someone from the back. And then my percentage of chokes went up just from understanding the control better, you know. So
and then we went off, and then like a month later we went off and both won gold medals.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah. That's right.
It's smart, man. Like you're first of all using somebody at the gym that's probably really good at something you're not as good at, and you're using. If there's something you're gonna know when you're in a tournament, like Chewy, you said, if somebody's got me in side control and I'm on bottom, it's not Jason's pressure, it's not Jason's side control, so I'm good. You know, you've almost built that confidence into your training, and so when you're at a tournament, you're gonna know you can handle it.
And that's one of the things that I really think. I mean, I love watching matches. I love watching. I always watch Marcelo Garcia. I love, Leandro Lowe and stuff. But people that have really influenced my jiu-jitsu is like Chewy, Renato, Sean Hammonds, Kyle Cannon. These guys that have really put me in positions for real that, that are good. And, they all got their own thing. And, if you don't know it, you're going to get caught. But it's a chance to grow and get better. But your training partners are really who shape your jiu-jitsu. And if you're not utilizing all of them to the best, then, that's a big mistake because, if you got somebody in your gym that's good at mount, oh, man. And then, if you can get out of their mount, kind of like you said, if it's not Jason's side control, well, it's not Chewy's back mount. Thank God. I'm out of this bad boy.
That's right. It's like you can get a lot from your training partners by utilizing, one, identifying what are they good at. And then from there saying, okay, well, how can I get the most from this training session with them? And a great way to do that, like you said, is like, okay, like you got a guy that's really good at mount. Well, let him get you in mount. Whether you ask him or you let him pass, let him get you in mount and then fight out of that. I used to years ago when we had a few guys, Rich, and then we had another guy named Chad. Both guys had killer triangles. I would purposely put myself into those triangles and play from them because I'm like, I want to be able to be untriangleable. That's not really even a good word, but hey, you understand what it means. But basically I didn't want to get triangled. And I remember it being in a match once as a black belt where a guy caught me in a triangle. And in the moment when that leg locked over my neck, I remember having this sense, and it was like an instant just thought that passed through my mind. I was like, this is not Chad's triangle. This isn't Rich's triangle. I'm getting out of this. And I did. I got out of it and past the guy's guard and immediately submitted him. And again, same thing with you with side control. Oh, people get me in side control. Okay, like you're not putting the pressure that I'm used to. It's as if you're lifting weights with 225 pounds. You're lifting 2 plates. Okay, just the number. And then you take a plate off. Oh, this is light work. When you utilize the best abilities of your training partners and you learn to defend them or learn to work against them, whatever that might be, then when someone who's not as skilled at those things starts to put you into them or whatever, your defense is, developed so much because you've been developing it up against the best person in your gym that you have access to, which usually works pretty well to then, develop that skill to fight against it.
Yeah. And I tell you, I think a lot of gyms, especially nowadays, you can tell a gym is good, but you go in there and they're all doing the same fundamentals, but everybody has these different games. And it's like, wow, this is awesome. This guy really is a triangle guy, footlight guy. Here's my takedown mount guy. It's really great to see that. And I love traveling and training with different people because you could see that they've got a good little training environment and, they've got a good little group that you can, get from even then. So I think jiu-jitsu's gotten to be very amazing, especially each year. I think it's better and better for sure.
How did you, so with your side control, your top pressure, what are some elements like that help you develop a very strong controlling top pressure, and maybe some tips for people listening that they can kind of implement into their game as well?
Well, I would say it's definitely gonna have to deal with your body. Right. It's about my body. It's about my spine. And it's not about my arms so much. So if I can really properly hold somebody in side control, I should be able to hold them. If my side control is perfect, I should be able to control them as long as I want without tiring out. Theoretically, that's the way it should be. When you first start, you're in there just like grabbing and squeezing.
Squeezing too much, yeah.
Squeezing the shit out of them, grabbing their gi and trying to squeeze it to dust. Whatever you're doing in the beginning, it's just, that just isn't it. you want to know, you want to be able to move with your chest, you want to be able to drop your hips, and you want to figure out that there's different types of pressure. There's more than one type of pressure. It's not just smash pressure. I can smash them. I can hug them. I can be like a sandbag. When they push, I can be like a feather. Once you understand those elements, and then, you can make up your own terms for it, but you understand that there's different feels inside control. It's your body, not your arms, and you can work those pressures to really open up your opponent and make them move towards the submission. That's what I would say.
Okay. Is there like certain areas on your body, obviously chest pressure, things like that?
Hip, chest, shoulder, everything. So I'm thinking about, like, I could put my shoulder down and make myself really heavy through the shoulder, just like I'm leaning on the person. Or I can relax my hips and come down on top of them and be like a wet towel, right? Or a sandbag. I can get an angle, or I can put my hip down, almost like a heavy sprawl pressure. It's just things like that. Just kind of playing around with different ways to make yourself feel heavy or light with minimum effort.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then, like, how did you work on developing that, or kind of that knowledge of pressure and where to put pressure at the right times?
Well, I would like to say I just kind of came up with it by myself, but I didn't. Renato is really good at it. Mike O'Donnell, he was like a sandbag dude. Especially, I tried to kill that guy a couple of times, so I know he really had good control. He'd put me in side control, and he'd just feel like, imagine somebody laying a big heavy water bed on you, and he was not that heavy. Things like that, and then also just train with guys that are light. Guys that when you push on them, next thing you know, you're getting armbar, like Seneca. I've rolled with Seneca some, and every time I've tried to move with him, I don't even know what's happening. I try to push or something. I shouldn't even reach my arm out, is what I'm thinking. I shouldn't be reaching my arm out right now with this guy, and he was still armbar me. He just wouldn't even be there. He'd just be in an armbar. So, like, getting to feel like high level pressure in different guys, that's kind of what helped me develop it. I learned it just from different instructors, but I don't even know, getting to roll with like high level people and being fortunate enough to get a roll with high level people, I can feel the different ways they use pressure. And everybody good tends to, at least I thought we were good, they use their pressure to move you to the submission. Whether that's a sandbag pressure plus a feather pressure, or they're using like a heavy smashing pressure. And then when you go to escape, they suddenly have a lot of freedom and they're going into their move. They use it in a very artful way. So for me, that's what I've tried to emulate over my jiu-jitsu career, I guess.
Gotcha.
The pressure thing, I think, is super important to talk about, because I think one of the mistakes that people make kind of goes right back to what you were saying. And this is like something super common, is that they don't make use of their body, and they simply just try to like add more pressure by squeezing. And so when you learn how to use your body to do the work, not only does it allow you to do it without tiring out, but like you were saying, it allows you to, you can maximize the weight that you do have. This is why guys like Renato, I mean, if you have Renato put on top of you, it's surprisingly how heavy that little guy is. He's not a big guy, but very heavy. I've had JT Torres on me showing a technique. And I mean, like, to the point where, I kind of like, man, he's just showing a move on me, but if I tapped right now, I wouldn't be upset about it. It doesn't feel very comfortable. I mean, the pressure is incredible, and they're still not squeezing with their arms, which is something contrary to what you see with a lot of newer people, where all they do, they get into it and you feel them almost shaking because they're squeezing so hard, which, if you do feel that, sort of a side tip, just breathe and relax, because if their arms are shaking from squeezing, that means that they're not able to be mobile to attack your arms or neck or anything else.
You're 46 and you've been training for quite a while. Like, what's your training like now? Probably not training as much as you used to when you were a young man, but like, how are you still keeping your body healthy together and also like able to train at least a high level?
Man, I'm glad you asked that, because I've had a couple of friends ask me recently. They were like, what are you doing to keep in shape? And I lied to them. I said it was weights or diet, but it's really it's really yoga. I mean, I do lift weights and it is the diet, but without I do a lot of yoga. I mean, at least 10 minutes in the morning, but a lot of times it's 30 to 45 minutes every day. I do still like to roll. I don't roll super intense, but we do a lot of positional rolling, concentrating on hand fighting. I mean, you guys definitely know, because you guys totally do the same thing at your place, but it helps me keep the injuries down, and I still will go hard. I will still go hard like 1 day a week. I'll show up to an open mat. It'll be no gi. I tell the young guys to kill me. They do. I feel better about myself. And then the next week, I'm still good to go. After a couple of days of, taking like a ice bath and some more yoga. By Monday, I'll be good. So I still do train a lot. I still like to box. I have like a little self-defense class, and we tend to work, even though it's self-defense, we tend to do a lot of boxing in that. I still enjoy that. But, a lot of my training is yoga and then situational stuff where I can figure stuff out. And then, hard once a week for about an hour. I feel like everybody should be able to roll for an hour. So I try to lead by example.
Here's a question for you. Something that I noticed, not just from, me, like I'm past this point, but I had the mind battle. And then I was talking to one of the students, Brandon, the guy, the fellow visually impaired grappler.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he and I were talking, and he's a little bit younger than us. And so the other day we were talking with each other, and he was having the battle of, he knows he needs to rest. His body feels it, but again, he feels that urge, like I need to push myself and I don't need to be lazy, whatever. And again, we've all trained really hard.
Oh yeah.
How did you deal with the mind battle, is what I'm going to call it, as you got older and you're coming to grips with the fact that your training capacity is just coming down? There's no way around it.
Oh, yeah.
And so what you used to be able to do, you no longer can do. And so how did you come to grips with that? How did you deal with that sort of situation when you're having to take time off, even though there might be a side of you that's either like, I used to be able to do this, I should be able to do this, or maybe even sort of a shaming of yourself, like, I need to do this, I need to stop being lazy, whatever?
Well, I don't think I'm going to be a good example. I had a neck surgery. So I'm just going until I couldn't raise my arm. I was actually signed up for the Chicago Open, and I couldn't raise my arm. And I was like, something's wrong with my shoulder. And then I went to the doctor, and they said it was my neck, right? So I'm like, oh man, not my neck, and it's probably from boxing. I did box a lot, especially when I was at Lexington. I'd go to different gyms, and sometimes you get the heavyweights hitting you and it'd push you or something.
And your head's like snapping back.
And I started, but it wasn't like a good punch. It was just more of a push. And I started getting stingers from that. It's probably from wrestling too. I used to do like, the what they call the Japanese style double leg, where you hit your forehead on their body and stuff. Look great in tournaments though. But the thing is, that's why I had to have surgery. When I was laid up for like a year, almost like 11 months, right? I was like, there's no way.
What did you have done?
I had a fusion. I think it's C5, C6.
Okay.
Right? C5, C6 fusion. I said, there's no way I'm going to quit training, but there's no way I'm going to, I got to go lighter. I just got to go lighter. There's just no getting around it. So after that, I really watched it. I really built myself back slow. I had a couple setbacks though. I got a little too rowdy. I would visit the gym and I'd be getting rowdy with somebody. And they would, nothing intentional, but they would snap my head down just like you would do, just like normal, nothing crazy. And my neck would go out. And I was like, okay. After that happened a couple times, I was like, I got to watch it. I got to really tone it back. I got to watch my neck, and I got to really kind of rehab it properly. And, I really had, ever since that, I was probably, close to 40. I think that really changed. I wish I would have done it sooner, because I also think it helped me become a better teacher and also just a better training partner. Because you're right, I can't do what I used to do, but there's still something I can do, right? And that's the important part for me. Is like, I'm not going to be doing barambolos or flipping up or doing some crazy takedowns anymore. I just I'm too nervous about my neck. Mm-hmm. So I really focus on moving smooth, moving with good timing, controlling the person, all the stuff that you should be doing anyway. Yeah. But, it's just another factor for me. I don't know if that really helps, Chewy.
No, it does.
I think it helps. Yeah.
Well, you had a clear sort of like event that worked almost like it's a point of demarcation, right? Like this is the moment when things had to shift. And I think that's where all of us come to at some point. There's some sort of, because most of us, if everything's going along okay, we're just going to continue. We're not going to change, right? Most humans typically change when something happens and it smacks us in the face and makes us change. Right. And so I've had those same instances. I was just curious about it because everybody experiences it for different reasons. How does your fusion feel now? Like, how does it feel?
I can stand on my head. I mean, I'm
Okay.
back. Getting punched in the head and stuff like that a little
Okay.
bit.
Well,
But,
I'm glad you're
yeah,
getting punched in the head again. That's
yeah.
great. Um,
Standing,
no, I was
on,
curious because
standing
a
on
lot
my
of
head.
times, the word fusion in a lot of our minds, it sounds scary. It doesn't sound good. It sounds like bad times. And so I was curious kind of how yours felt.
Yeah, I mean, it feels good. I mean, of course, like when you have something like that, I think it's like I should have been training this way the whole time, but you didn't,
Mhm.
So I think it feels good. I think I know some people that have had the same surgery and it's not turned out as well, but being a person that works out a lot, that enjoys working out, and I think that always helps, especially when you're going into a surgery. So
Yeah.
if my neck muscles weren't really strong, I don't think I could have came back from it like I have.
Man, you know what though? Like I was just thinking about this while we're talking about it. In my mind, I'm thinking, if only I had known what I know now and go back to when I was 20 something years old, whatever. But then I think about it, I'm like, nah, I'd probably make not maybe the exact same mistakes. I probably would train smarter overall, but I would still push my body to the limit. You know what I mean? Like,
I'd
because
go back and quit. I'd go back in time and quit and bring that book like Biff did from Back to the Future and just gamble. I would change my life. I'd change my whole situation.
Well, you know what I mean. I mean, like, but I'm saying, like, if you could go back to, like, with like, let's say, for instance, if all of a sudden we snapped a finger, and the only thing that changed was that your body, basically, all the tissues, essentially became 20. Right, you
Yeah.
became 20 again. It's like all of a sudden you got the, I would probably still rag my body out because it would be like having a sports car that's got like a friggin' 1,000 horses in it. I'm like, I got to test this thing out and
Oh
see what it
yeah.
does.
Get my
I'm
body
gonna,
back to when I was like 26. That's when I started kind of doing powerlifting a little bit more.
uh
And man, that'd be awesome. You're right. That'd be great. I would
But
ruin it.
I guess what I'm saying is like on one side, this is just me. On one side of it, I feel like I would be smarter with my body if I have the knowledge that I do now, and I would be smarter to a degree, but I would still probably train a crap ton, probably too much because it would just be fun. I mean, because again, just the fact that all of a sudden I have this renewed capacity of training, I would I'm like, yeah, I probably know this isn't smart to do my fourth session today, but I
Oh
feel good
yeah.
because you know what I mean. I'd still
Oh
do
my
I'd probably
God.
make I'd probably make a lot of the same mistakes. Some I wouldn't make, but I'd like make a lot of the same mistakes.
I'd roll at lunch and then I would have fights. I'd fight somebody that night. It didn't matter to me. I did not care at the time. Would I do that again? Yes, I would totally do that. But I wouldn't fight anyone. I would do MMA again. I would just do jujitsu. It'd be amazing. Yeah, like 4 sessions a day. I think. I think you could make it in a young body. I think that'd be okay. Because
Yeah.
then then you wouldn't have to worry about like you at least you'd probably avoid all the same injuries. That'd be
Yeah,
your hope that you'd avoid all the same injuries that you occurred this first
right.
round.
And I think I could. Here's a question for you, Jason. You are an accomplished musician.
Oh yeah.
So for you guys listening, we didn't really talk about it, but Jason's a really good musician. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know which one you think you do better, but in both cases, like,
Well, if you
he's
ask my musician friends, they're going to say jujitsu.
okay. But again, I've seen him play before. Very good musician, and I'm curious because we're talking about two arts, two skills that are also two arts. And I think that those are interesting things to consider. And a lot of the lessons that you learn from one, I'm sure, have transferable mental benefits to the other because of
Oh
approach and
yeah.
everything else. Like right now in the gym, we have a guy who is a classically trained. I forgot the instrument, but he was like on the Louisville Orchestra for a long time,
Oh, he's
and
good.
so. And now he's doing jiu-jitsu and he's rapidly getting better faster.
Oh
And
yeah.
it makes sense because he understands how to get better at skill,
That's right.
and so he just understands how that works. But I'm curious, what kind of lessons have you maybe gained from, or do you think have transferred from music to jiu-jitsu and maybe vice versa?
Oh man, the biggest lesson that I've gained from playing music is giving myself grace, giving
Mm,
myself giving myself time to suck,
mm,
giving myself the patience and the belief to know that at some point I will get this,
mhm,
and that it's very hard.
mm,
I'm not trying to learn smoke on the water. I'm learning jazz. That's what I really like. And
yeah,
I play music out and I play all kinds of different stuff. But jazz is, it's kind of like for me, it's like jujitsu. I mean,
yeah,
we talked about it when you were here, but but giving myself the space to grow and to not be good at it is tough. That is something you have to do in both, because if you believe you're going to get good and you spend time doing it, that's really what is going to make you good, right? There's people say it's not who's the best, it's who's left. You get all these talented people coming into jiu-jitsu, and they're unable to give themselves the grace and the space to suck. So they end up quitting. And the people that can do it, they're the ones who are going to get good. So I think that's been a big lesson for me, honestly. And to look at myself and my music and jiu-jitsu in, pretty an unbiased way, not so much one way, not so much the other way, just how is it, just matter of fact, how is this position? Is it good? Is it okay? And you could critique yourself, and you could take critique a little bit better when, you kind of, people say it, you gotta get rid of that ego. You gotta squash it, because, it's inevitable with jiu-jitsu and music.
Huh, that's interesting. So yeah, I think like we always use these cliche terms like trust the process, that kind of stuff, like you said, but that's part of the process, right? I forgot who wrote the quote. I think it may have been Goethe, but it was like, before you can be the master, you have to be the fool. So like when you want to master something, when you want to be really good, you have to be willing to be at the bottom of the totem pole for a while, at the bottom of the pecking order. You got to be willing to suck at something and be uncomfortable. That's how we pay for the success later on.
Right.
And so, kind of the way, to me, you're saying, like, give yourself grace, because you're doing what you got to do, and it's just part of the process. And that's something you can take to music, to jiu-jitsu, to everything.
Everything.
And for anybody that's listening, because I'm a fan of jazz, like when you think about jazz, and the way that I've talked about jazz numerous times, because I listen to the way that jazz musicians talk about playing jazz, and it sounds so similar to what it's like doing jiu-jitsu, where the quote I often use comes from Charlie Parker, where Charlie Parker was talking about, you master the instrument and you master the music. Essentially, you're going through the lessons, everything else. And then he says, and then eventually you forget all that shit and you just play music, right?
That's
and
right.
You think about jiu-jitsu, right? We spend years mastering these techniques, these concepts, and, learning from people. You're doing this stuff. And then eventually when you're in, you're just improvising at times. You're having to figure things out on the fly. And, there isn't necessarily a textbook way to do it. You just have to let your body do the work and just do what it's trained to do.
Yeah, and some people are, just like music. There's some people that are physical geniuses too. They could pick right up on jiu-jitsu and then have it. I mean, I think I've had, just kind of like music, I've had to work kind of through the techniques and figure them out and break them down. And I think to me that's a fun thing too. But I mean, there's definitely something to it. Like when you can unconsciously competence, was it unconscious competence? When you could have that, then that's when you're kind of got it. And people start having flashes at that sometimes. When they're like a blue belt, they're like, I didn't even think about that. That was just amazing. And then you'll see like a big spark after they kind of start having those little moments.
Yeah, well, eventually, I feel like your body, and I'm sure it's the same with music, I would imagine, with my body in jiu-jitsu, and I know you're this way too. Like, yes, I have to actively think about stuff, but there's a certain level of just, my body's done this for so long that I do jiu-jitsu and it's as natural as walking. I mean, it's like, it takes very little thought for me to roll at a very moderate pace. I can literally just do it. And my body's just doing on autopilot what it's been trained to do for the last 20 plus years. And then sometimes maybe during a really hard roll or something, I'm having to think a little bit more. But during most rounds, it's like my body's just doing. And there's times, and I don't know if you've had this experience before, I'm sure you have, where you're rolling or you're competing and you do something that you never do, that you've never done before, but your body just does it. And afterwards, you're kind of like, almost like you're watching it as it's happening and going, oh man, look what I'm doing. This is pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, and then afterwards you have to go back and be like, what the hell did I just do?
Oh yeah. I've had a lot of these moments. I mean, there's still sometimes I don't even know, like, especially no-gi. I've done so much no-gi in my past, just from like with MMA and 4 seasons and stuff. Sometimes I'll do something and my guys, what'd you do? I was like, I don't know, dude. I don't know. I wish I could tell you, but it's just doing it. And I've got to experience this quite a bit. I love it. I mean, that's the one thing that keeps me coming back to training, because even though you may roll and you do your moves, I mean, it's always different. Every round is always different, and that's something to look forward to every day. Is get out there and rolling and getting to getting to experience new ways of doing this stuff, and getting to see hey, maybe this doesn't work today, or maybe it does. I don't know. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, very cool. Jason, where are you located? Where's your gym at now? If people want to kind of see what you're up to, maybe train with you or stop in, where are you at?
Man, I got all kinds of stuff. I've got Jiu-Jitsu Columbus.com. That's my school, but I'm getting a website done because I've actually been doing a lot of seminars, and I just did one in Colorado. So I'm probably gonna do a few more seminars this year. So I've got a website I'm doing. I don't know who I'm gonna get it built, who to build it, but I don't know if you guys just build your own stuff or what, but so just jujitsucolumbus.com. On Instagram, you can follow me at Jits and Jazz.
Jits and Jazz, got it.
Yeah,
we'll tag it. Very cool. And then how did you get, let's just end with this one. How'd you get your nickname? Not Blind Fury, not the other one, not the other one you almost got, which would have been pretty good, but
yeah. Well, man, I think it's because especially when I was younger. I'm still this way, but I'm pretty intense, I guess.
You were a wild roll back in the day.
I know,
like it wasn't spazzy, Jason might kick you in the face kind of thing.
It's gonna be athletic.
But it was athletic and it was intense, and you still might catch an elbow here and there. And it's because it's going to be a tough roll, because you got to think again. It's like you came from, you got into with MMA fighting and stuff like that. And MMA fighter type rolls are always a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more physical, because of the fact that you're getting into a fight where everything has urgency, opposed to just a pure jiu-jitsu setting where you can kind of lay back and, wipe sweat off your face and catch your breath. When it comes to an actual like fighting situation, everything has to be executed with like effort, 100% effort and urgency. You know what I mean? Because I think that's where I was the same way for a long time.
Well, it's so funny because I think, now I've got a lot more perspective on me. And I used to go roll with dudes, and, guys that didn't really do MMA, they would just do jiu-jitsu, and they would fucking hate me. They would hate my guts. They're like, "You're too rough," or "You're too strong." I'm like, dude, I'm trying to roll. I mean, I used to go to roll with Mike O'Donnell or go down to American Top Team or whatever. I mean, my God, dude, that's how everybody's gonna kill you. I went to George Gergel's one time up in Cincinnati. Those guys, it was awesome. They were trying to kill me though, So, and some of them didn't do MMA, but they did jiu-jitsu. So I understand. I think that I understand that people. Yeah, I think what it is that I was able to start taking the athleticism out a little bit more and kind of tailoring the role to people that weren't as physical.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long time, I believed in doing it all. When you were rolling, hey, this is the sum of all your parts. If you've been doing your CrossFit and you've been doing your arm bars, then I should be able to feel that when we're rolling, right? But some guys, they weren't really doing that. I didn't understand at the time there were people that would, oh my God, it never occurred to me that people would only want to do it as a hobby.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that people wouldn't want to just battle through the death after they get off their accountant job.
Now, was there like a specific moment where someone said like they dubbed you to Blind Fury, or did it just come about in training one day? Like,
yeah, they called me that. They definitely dubbed me. So it was Mike O'Donnell and my friend Victor, and almost got the nickname Bipolar Roller, but they gave that to somebody else. It's like, I'm not bipolar, dude. You can't say that. It's like, okay, Blind Fury. I was like, all right. So they called it because I was just very intense. We were doing boxing, kickboxing, like. Kickboxing with takedowns, and it was just the way it was. I mean, we had guys that would later on fight in Bellator and UFC out of this little group, and a bunch of jiu-jitsu black belts. So the group was pretty tough, and dealing with those guys. I mean, you couldn't be a chump. So Blind Fury, good nickname, rolls off the tongue.
Bipolar Roller. That's another good one.
That is a good. I didn't get that one though. That's a good one.
That's
things were to use that one.
Yeah. Things were a little more, definitely a little more hard-nosed and kind of intense. And especially if I roll with someone, I do jiu-jitsu as a hobby. I never fought MMA. It was never my goal. So I'm in that hobbyist category, from the start. I definitely would notice rolls with MMA fighters or guys that maybe wrestled. There's more urgency there. There's a lot more, and because
Yeah.
you're going to get, you can't create space because you're going to get punched or kicked or hit. So it's all about closing the distance
Right.
and, spatial awareness and spatial control. And like, I think that's just kind of
And I
part,
think it's just
part of the nature.
I think some of it was, I mean, it's not like I was just moving willy nilly. I would get good control positions, and then when I would move, it'd be very explosive.
Yeah.
It'd be very explosive. And I just think that, for some people, I mean, I don't remember really injuring anybody intentionally, but I mean, I guarantee it happened just because, they weren't conditioning their body. They weren't going to the gym, or they weren't going to the track. They weren't doing all the physical training and stuff I was doing.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it my whole life. I ran track and swam and everything in school too, my whole life, just like I've been wrestling. So getting to do all those sports really helps. But I learned to calm that down over time, just because it's like, I started getting complaints from my older training partners, like, dude, you're just too young. I can't roll with you. You got to take it easy. So I'd be like, okay, I don't want to be a dick. So if you give me some good criticism, I'll chill out for sure. And what it was is just the explosiveness, because if something happened and it wouldn't be necessarily my movement, it'd be their movement countering me. That's sometimes when they would get hurt, because they put their hand on my hip the wrong way. They would do something that, they're just not used to that kind of level, and I would say that I'll save my explosive rolling when I was rolling with Chewy. I'll save it for a big burly guy that can handle it.
That's right. We had some good ones.
Heated exchange. It's good. Well, man, Jason, appreciate it. Chewy, you got anything for Mr. Visually Impaired Fury?
No, man, it's good having you on, and
it's good to be on,
good
man.
chatting with you, and good to have you here. And hopefully, you guys that are listening to the podcast enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right, brother.
All right, guys. So hopefully, you enjoyed that podcast with Jason. Again, got some ideas from it. Whether you're, thinking about training and pulling out the ideas on situational rolling, whether you're getting a little bit older, and you need to adjust your training, or maybe you just need to give yourself a little bit of grace. A very simple idea, but super important. Most of the most effective ideas that I've ever come across are typically the simplest. Doesn't mean they're the easiest to implement, but they're generally pretty simple.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday about this. Like, most of us know some semblance of what we need to do, right? Like, if you talk to a 800-pound person, they could probably tell you how to move their life in a better direction, right? Stop eating fast food, go for a walk, drink a lot of water. They know what to do.
Yeah.
It just comes down to actually executing on it, and so it can be a battle. It can be a battle to execute those things, and whether it's just giving yourself grace or simply just putting yourself in bad positions with some of your tough training partners, you know what I mean? But again, there's big payoffs to that. Generally, anything that sort of makes you uncomfortable is generally a good place to go.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast or not. There's a great story from Theodore Roosevelt and Booker T. Washington. Have we talked about this?
I don't know. Go proceed, and then we'll share it anyway. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll share it anyway. It's a good story regardless. But so basically, Theodore Roosevelt was nervous about having Booker T. Washington because it would be the first time that a black man ever had dinner at the White House with a sitting president, right? It's a big deal, right? And obviously, during the time period that it was, you had a lot of, racist assholes and stuff like that who were resistant towards it. And Theodore Roosevelt said that for a moment, he was apprehensive. He was nervous. He was uncomfortable about it because he's thinking like, man, what's the news or outlets going to say?
Yeah.
What are people going to, basically, how is he going to get attacked over this, right? And he said that as soon as he had that thought, he said, I'm doing it. He said and I'm paraphrasing here because I'm not reading the full quote right now, but he basically said immediately, he said, nope, we're making this happen, right? We're sending this letter. Let's get this guy to the White House because I think he understood, which is something that people, you hopefully come to realize this at some point, that your discomfort is typically where the growth lies, where the good stuff is. When you get yourself uncomfortable, typically that's where good stuff happens. It's not necessarily going to be pleasant at first, but good stuff comes from it. And again, with Theodore Roosevelt, he was attacked by the media. He did have people that were yelling at him and angry about it and telling him, what a terrible person he was. But I think that, from himself and the way that he felt about it, which is the most important thing, he felt pretty good about it. And I think history also has, looked kindly on it. So I think, again, just those ideas to chew on. So hopefully you guys enjoy the podcast. Again, big thanks for listening, and thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD. Again, if you've tried CBD before, great. If you haven't, then again, I would encourage you to try CBD. It's a really cool product, a great supplement. And again, it's a supplement. So if your diet sucks, if you're not ever getting sleep, if you're, not giving yourself time to recover, then those are the things that you always need to put in place first, right? Before you worry about an actual supplement. But that said, as far as supplements go, it can be a very effective and helpful supplement in relation to dealing with recovery and sports induced inflammation, which is what's going on when we're getting our bodies all banged up in the gym. And again, everybody's body's a little different. We all respond to supplements and medicines and everything else differently. So my encouragement to you is, if you're interested in trying it out, try it out for a month, see what kind of effect it has on your body, see what you notice from it, as you should be with any supplement, diet, or anything you try. See what you notice, not going off of other people's experience, but seeing what your experience is. And then again, if you want to save 30% in doing that, go to the website, charlottesweb.com, use the promo code Chewjitsu30, CHEWJITSU30 for 30% off the order. Also, thanks to our buddy Matt at Epic Roll for supporting the podcast. Again, if you want to get any new rash guards, shorts, t-shirts, gis, whatever it might be, Matt makes tons of great quality stuff, cool designs, great customer service, and it's available at epicrollbjj.com. Promo code is Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. And along with that, guys, just a heads up, we'll be doing some new Chewjitsu rash guards coming up in the near future. We've got a new design. I think it looks cool. It's still very simple, but cool design, and hope you guys enjoy it when it does come out. And so more details on that soon. Also, if you would like to support the podcast directly, you can become a contributing patron to our Patreon, which is at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up, you'll get access to an exclusive library of content with every episode that we have with no ads. Every episode guest that we've had with a little snippet that is not released anywhere else. We also have seminar recordings from me and videos that I've never released on YouTube. We also have Eugene sharing different warm-up routines and mobility routines specifically for jiu-jitsu practitioners, and also some different podcast extras where me and Eugene talk about a particular topic that's not released anywhere. And again, you get access to that at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And last but not least, guys, if you would like to get access to my daily email where I go into everything from jiu-jitsu training, dieting ideas that I've found useful, strength training ideas, conditioning type stuff, building your cardio, to books I'm reading, philosophical ideas that I'm finding, or even just random stories that I want to share from my gym, you get access to it at the website chewjitsu.net/join. The emails are really short, probably take you 3 to 5 minutes to read. Afterwards, you can unsubscribe at any time should you care. But if you like it, you'll get to see the email. You'll also get access to some free ebooks I give away, and you'll also get exclusive offers that I do not release anywhere else. And so again, it's at chewjitsu.net/join. And so guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you had a fun time listening to it, and we'll talk to you next time.